The fluorescent lights of Detroit General's emergency room cast everything in a harsh, clinical white that reminded Marcus Rodriguez too much of the field hospital in Kandahar. He pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to push away the memory that always surfaced during the quiet moments between ambulance calls. "Rodriguez, you got incoming," shouted Nancy, the head nurse, her voice cutting through his thoughts like a scalpel. "Gunshot wound, ETA 3 minutes. Marcus straightened his shoulders and checked his supplies one more time. Gauze, bandages, morphine, the same dance he'd performed 1,000 times in the desert, except here the sand was replaced by cracked linoleum and the sound of helicopters by wailing sirens. At 28, Marcus carried himself with the precise movements of someone who'd learned that hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. His dark eyes, inherited from his Mexican grandmother, had seen too much for someone his age, and the small scar above his left eyebrow served as a permanent reminder of the IED that had ended his military career 2 years earlier. The ambulance doors burst open, and paramedics wheeled in a teenager who couldn't have been older than 16. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandages on his chest, and his breathing was shallow and rapid. Marcus's training kicked in automatically. "What do we got?" he asked, falling into step beside the gurney. "Miguel Santos, 16 years old, single GSW to the upper chest. Vitals are stable but dropping," replied Jake, one of the paramedics Marcus had worked with dozens of times. "Happened on Corktown, looks gang-related." Marcus's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away the boy's shirt to assess the wound. The bullet had entered just below the right clavicle, dangerously close to major arteries. As he worked to control the bleeding, the boy's eyes fluttered open. "Am I gonna die?" Miguel whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos of the ER. "Not on my watch," Marcus replied firmly, the same words he'd said to countless soldiers in Afghanistan. "What's your mom's name? We need to call her." Maria Santos." The boy's breathing became more labored. "Tell her I'm sorry. About Diego." Marcus's hands froze for a fraction of a second. Diego, his little brother's name. But that was impossible. His Diego was safe at home, probably playing video games or doing homework. "Diego who?" Marcus asked, but Miguel had lost consciousness. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician, rushed over. "Talk to me, Marcus." "Single GSW, close to the subclavian artery. He's lost a lot of blood, but the entry wound is clean. No exit wound, so the bullet's still in there." Marcus rattled off the medical details while his mind raced. There had to be hundreds of Diegos in Detroit. As they wheeled Miguel into surgery, Marcus pulled out his phone and called home. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, it's Diego. I'm probably out causing trouble somewhere. Leave a message." Marcus tried Diego's cell phone next, straight to voicemail. "Marcus, you okay?" Nancy appeared at his elbow, concern creasing her weathered face. She'd been working the ER for 20 years and had developed an almost maternal concern for the younger staff. "Yeah, just tired." Marcus forced a smile, but his hands were already reaching for his car keys. "Nancy, I need to take a quick break. Family emergency." "Go ahead, honey. We've got things covered here." Marcus drove through the familiar streets of southwest Detroit, past the colorful murals on Verna Highway and the small Mexican restaurants that reminded him of his childhood. The neighborhood had changed since he'd left for the army 8 years ago. More boarded-up buildings, more young men standing on corners with nothing to do but wait for trouble. He pulled up to the small brick house where he'd grown up, where his mother still lived and where Diego was supposed to be safe. The porch light was on, but Diego's beat-up Honda Civic wasn't in the driveway. Marcus used his key and stepped inside. "Diego? Mom? Mijo? You're home early." His mother, Eleanor, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 55, she still moved with the quick efficiency of someone who'd raised 2 boys while working double shifts at the Ford plant. "Where's Diego, Mom?" "He said he was going to study at his friend's house. Why? What's wrong?" Marcus could read the worry that instantly clouded her features. Elena Rodriguez had spent 3 tours waiting for the call that every military mother dreaded. She'd developed an instinct for danger. "I'm sure it's nothing, Mom." "What friend?" "Tommy Reyes, I think. They were working on some project together." She reached for Marcus's hand. "Marcus, you're scaring me. What's going on?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang. Diego's number flashed on the screen. "Diego, where the hell are you?" "Marcus?" Diego's voice was shaky, younger than his 18 years. "I need help, man. I'm in trouble. Where are you?" "I can't." I can't say over the phone. Can you meet me at the old warehouse on Porter Street? The one where we used to play when we were kids? Marcus grabbed his jacket. I'll be right there. Don't move, and don't talk to anyone. Marcus, be careful. This is bigger than you think. The line went dead, and Marcus stared at his phone. In the background, he could hear his mother praying in Spanish, the same prayers she'd whispered every night when he was deployed. Dersulikira Comsetum, the abandoned warehouse on Porter Street, stood like a monument to Detroit's industrial past, its broken windows staring out at the empty lot where Marcus and Diego had once imagined themselves as soldiers fighting imaginary wars. Now, as Marcus parked his truck behind a pile of rusted machinery, those childhood games felt like a cruel prophecy. The October wind cut through his jacket as he approached the building. Detroit in autumn was unforgiving. Cold enough to bite, but not cold enough to kill the smell of urban decay that seemed to permeate everything. Marcus moved carefully, his military training automatically cataloguing potential threats. Multiple exits, good sight lines, but too many places for someone to hide. Diego, he called softly, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Over here. Diego stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, and Marcus felt his heart skip. His little brother looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past few hours. Diego's usually perfect hair was disheveled, his designer jacket torn at the shoulder, and there was dried blood on his knuckles. Jesus, Diego, what happened to you? Marcus crossed the distance between them in 3 quick strides, automatically checking his brother for injuries the way he'd been trained to assess wounded soldiers. I'm okay, Diego said, but his voice cracked. It's not my blood. Then whose blood is it? Diego sank down onto a makeshift seat made from concrete blocks. You remember Miguel Santos? From high school? Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Short kid, played soccer? Yeah, that's him. We've been hanging out lately. Him and Tommy and some other guys. Diego's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. They said it was just small stuff, you know? Moving packages from one place to another. Easy money. What kind of packages, Diego? I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. Diego took a long drag, his hands still trembling. But tonight everything went wrong. We were supposed to meet some guys, make an exchange and get out, but someone started shooting. Marcus knelt in front of his brother, forcing Diego to meet his eyes. Tell me exactly what happened. We were at the old auto plant on Michigan Avenue. Miguel had this backpack, and we were supposed to give it to these 2 guys in a black SUV. But when we got there were more guys than expected, and they looked professional. Not like the usual street dealers. Professional how? Military gear, tactical vests. And Marcus, Diego's voice dropped to almost a whisper. One of them recognized you. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. What do you mean, recognized me? He had this picture on his phone. You in your army uniform. He asked Miguel if his last name was Rodriguez, if he knew Marcus Rodriguez, who used to be a medic in the 82nd Airborne. The pieces began clicking into place with horrible clarity. Marcus had treated hundreds of wounded soldiers during his tours, but he'd also seen things that weren't supposed to happen, equipment that went missing, weapons that ended up in the wrong hands. A supply sergeant named Patterson who'd asked too many questions about inventory. What happened to Miguel? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. When Miguel said he didn't know anything, the guy got angry, started talking about loose ends and security risks. Miguel tried to run, and that's when the shooting started. Diego's voice broke. I hid behind a car, but Miguel... He didn't make it to cover fast enough. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering Miguel on the operating table just hours earlier. The boy would live, but this was far from over. Diego, I need you to listen to me very carefully. These aren't just drug dealers. This is something much bigger, and you've stumbled into the middle of it. What do you mean? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Diego a news article he'd bookmarked months ago. Remember when I came back from Afghanistan? I tried to report some things I'd seen. Equipment theft, weapons being diverted. Nobody wanted to listen to a medic with PTSD. Diego read the headline, Federal Investigation Targets Military Equipment Theft Ring. The article was dated 6 months earlier. This is why they have your picture, Marcus continued. Someone thinks I know something that could hurt them, and now they think you might know it too. But I don't know anything. It doesn't matter what you know, it matters what they think you know. Marcus stood up, his mind already working through possibilities. We need to get you somewhere safe, and then we need to figure out who these people are. Marcus, there's something else. Diego's voice was barely audible. The backpack Miguel was carrying. Before the shooting started, I saw what was inside. What? Military weapons, not just handguns. Assault rifles, grenades, stuff I've never seen on the streets before. And there was paperwork with it. Official-looking documents with army stamps. Marcus felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just about stolen equipment being sold to gangs. This was about someone in the military actively supplying weapons to criminals, and Miguel Santos, a 16-year-old kid who just wanted to make some quick money, had become collateral damage. We need to leave now. Marcus helped Diego to his feet. We're going to Mom's house to get some things, and then we're going somewhere these people can't find us. What about Miguel? What about his family? I'll take care of Miguel. But first I need to keep you alive. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your brother saw too much. 48 hours to produce everything you took from Afghanistan, or he ends up like his friend. We know where your mother lives. Diego read the message over Marcus's shoulder. Marcus, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this. Marcus deleted the message and put his arm around his brother's shoulders. You didn't drag me into anything. I was already in it. I just didn't know it yet. Outside, the Detroit skyline glittered in the distance, beautiful and dangerous like a promise that might be broken. Marcus realized that his war hadn't ended when he came home from Afghanistan. It had just changed battlefields. Marcus drove through the pre-dawn darkness of Detroit, his eyes constantly checking the rear-view mirror, while Diego slumped in the passenger seat, finally asleep from exhaustion. They'd spent the night in a cheap motel on 8 Mile, paying cash and using fake names. Skills Marcus had hoped he'd never need again. The plan was simple. Get Diego somewhere safe, then figure out who was pulling the strings. But first, Marcus needed to visit someone who might have answers. Sergeant Major William Bull Patterson lived in a modest ranch house in Warren, about 20 minutes north of Detroit. Marcus had served under Patterson during his second tour, and the man had always struck him as solid, reliable, the kind of NCO who kept his soldiers alive through competence rather than heroics. If anyone could help Marcus understand what was happening, it would be Bull. Marcus parked 2 blocks away and walked through the quiet suburban neighborhood, noting the American flags on several porches and the well-maintained lawns that spoke of military precision. At 0600 hours, Bull would be awake. Old habits from a lifetime of reveille formations. The porch light came on before Marcus could knock. Marcus Rodriguez, Bull's gravelly voice carried through the door. I wondered when you'd show up. Bull opened the door wearing Army PT gear, his graying hair cut to regulation length despite being retired for 3 years. At 55, he still moved like he could outrun soldiers half his age. Bull, I need to talk to you. I figured as much. Coffee's on. Bull stepped aside to let Marcus in. Your brother okay? The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. How do you know about Diego? Bull's living room was what Marcus expected. Military memorabilia, photographs from various deployments, and a bookshelf filled with military history. But there was something else, surveillance equipment set up by the front window, and Marcus noticed the slight bulge under Bull's left arm that indicated a concealed weapon. Sit down, son. Bull handed Marcus a cup of coffee. We need to talk about Afghanistan. Bull, what's going on? You remember Staff Sergeant Collins from Supply? Marcus nodded. Collins had been responsible for equipment inventory at Forward Operating Base Chapman during Marcus's 3rd tour. Collins is dead, car accident in Phoenix 2 weeks ago. Brake lines cut. Bull's eyes were hard. And Lieutenant Morrison, the one who signed off on all the equipment transfers, house fire in Tampa, no survivors. Marcus felt ice forming in his chest. Someone's cleaning house. Smart boy, always were quick on the uptake. Bull sat across from Marcus, his coffee untouched. The question is, what did you see over there that's got people scared enough to start killing witnesses? I reported the missing equipment. Weapons, communications gear, medical supplies. I filed it through proper channels, but nothing came of it. What else? Marcus closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember details he'd tried to forget. There was a convoy that got hit by an IED about 6 months before I rotated home. We were providing medical support, and when I was treating the wounded, I saw something. What did you see? One of the vehicles that got hit was carrying weapons, but they weren't our weapons. They were older Soviet-era AK-47s and RPGs. When I asked about it later, I was told it was part of a classified operation to arm friendly militias. Bull leaned forward. Who told you that? Major Hendricks from intelligence. But Bull, those weapons didn't look like they were going to friendlies. They had fresh packing, new serial numbers. Someone was buying Soviet weapons and shipping them somewhere else. And you think those weapons ended up here in Detroit? Last night, Diego saw military-grade weapons being distributed to gang members, and someone has my picture, asking questions about what I know. Bull stood up and walked to his window, peering through the surveillance equipment. Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. That equipment theft you reported, it wasn't just theft. It was part of a systematic operation to funnel weapons to criminal organizations in the United States. What? Think about it. You take legitimate military weapons, report them as combat losses or destroyed by enemy action, then sell them on the black market. Clean serial numbers, untraceable provenance, and buyers who pay premium prices for military-grade firepower. Marcus felt sick. How long has this been going on? Years, maybe longer. And it goes high up the chain, high enough that when people started asking questions, those people started dying. Why are you telling me this? Bull turned away from the window. Because I was part of it, Marcus, not by choice, but I knew what was happening and I didn't stop it. The admission hung in the air between them like smoke from a battlefield. Bull, when I figured out what was happening, I started documenting everything. Names, dates, serial numbers, transfer orders. I thought maybe I could build a case, turn it over to CID or the FBI. Bull opened a safe hidden behind a photograph of his unit. But then Collins died and Morrison, and I realized I wasn't building a case. I was signing my own death warrant. He handed Marcus a thick manila envelope. Everything I have is in there. Enough to bring down a dozen officers and maybe twice as many civilian contractors. Marcus hefted the envelope. Why give it to me? Because you're already a target. They think you know something, which means you're dangerous to them whether you actually know anything or not. Bull's expression was grim. And because you're young enough and stubborn enough to maybe survive long enough to get this to the right people. What about you? I'm an old soldier, Marcus. I've had a good run, but your brother's 18 years old. He's got his whole life ahead of him if we can keep him alive long enough to see it. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. The same unknown number from the night before. Time's running out. Bring us what we want or start counting bodies. Bull read the message over Marcus's shoulder. They're escalating. That's not good. I need to get Diego somewhere safe. No, son. You need to get Diego somewhere defensive. There's a difference. Bull walked to another safe and pulled out 2 pistols and several magazines. You remember what I taught you about urban combat? Marcus nodded. Bull had been one of the instructors who'd cross-trained medics in combat operations, reasoning that in asymmetric warfare, everyone needed to know how to fight. Same principles apply here. Control the terrain, know your exits, and never let them dictate the terms of engagement. Bull handed Marcus one of the pistols. You know how to use this? It's been a while. It's like riding a bicycle, a very deadly bicycle. Bull's grin was without humor. Now tell me about these people who have your brother's picture. Marcus described everything Diego had told him about the men at the auto plant, their equipment, their professional appearance. Sounds like private contractors, Bull said. Probably ex-military, hired by whoever's running this operation to handle security and clean up loose ends. How do we fight people like that? Carefully, and with better intelligence than they have. Bull tapped the envelope Marcus was holding. Everything in there is documented and cross-referenced. If we can get it to the right people in federal law enforcement, we can bring this whole thing down. And if we can't, Bull's expression darkened, then we do what soldiers do when they're surrounded and outgunned. We fight our way out. Dr. Sarah Chen found Marcus in the hospital parking garage at 800 hours, leaning against his truck and staring at nothing. She'd worked with him long enough to recognize the signs of a man processing trauma, the 1,000-yard stare that combat veterans sometimes got when the past came rushing back. You missed your shift, she said, approaching carefully. Sarah had done her residency at a VA hospital and understood that sometimes the best thing you could do for a veteran was simply be present. I know. Family emergency. Marcus looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. The Santos kid is going to be okay. Surgery went well. Bullet missed the major arteries by millimeters. You did good work yesterday. Thanks. Marcus's response was automatic, distracted. Sarah studied his face. She was 35, had been working emergency medicine for 8 years, and had learned to read people quickly. Marcus Rodriguez was one of the best trauma medics she'd ever worked with, calm under pressure, skilled with his hands, and genuinely caring about his patients. But right now, he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. "Marcus, is everything okay? You look like you're about to go to war." The irony of her choice of words wasn't lost on him. "Sarah, can I ask you something? Off the record?" "Of course. If you knew something that could help people but might put you in danger, what would you do?" Sarah sat on the concrete barrier next to Marcus's truck. "Is this about the Santos kid? Did you know him before yesterday?" "No, but—" Marcus paused, weighing how much he could safely tell her. "His shooting wasn't random. It's connected to something bigger, something that goes back to my time in the army." "Military weapons on the street?" Marcus looked at her sharply. "What makes you say that?" "Because Miguel Santos is the fourth gunshot victim we've treated in the past 6 months, with wounds from high-velocity military-grade ammunition, the kind of rounds that don't belong in civilian hands." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were concerned. "And because I've noticed that all 4 victims were young Hispanic men from the same general area." "You think someone's targeting them specifically?" "I think someone's using military weapons in gang violence, and these kids are getting caught in the middle." Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a spreadsheet. "I started tracking it after the second case. Same ammunition type, same entry wound patterns, same demographic." Marcus stared at the data. Sarah had unknowingly documented the street-level evidence of the weapons trafficking operation that Bull had described. "Sarah, you need to stop looking into this." "Why?" "Because the people doing this have already killed to protect their operation, and they won't hesitate to kill again." Sarah's expression hardened. "Marcus, I took an oath to do no harm. If someone is flooding our streets with military weapons, and kids are dying because of it, I have a responsibility to do something. And I took an oath to protect and defend. Right now, I'm telling you that the best way to protect people is to let me handle this." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus's phone rang. Diego's number. "Diego, are you okay?" "Marcus, they have Mom." Diego's voice was barely controlled panic. "I went home to get some clothes, and there was a note on the kitchen table. They want to trade her for the documents." Marcus felt the world tilt. He'd underestimated how quickly their enemies would move. "Where are you now?" "Payphone on Verner Highway." "Marcus, what documents? What do they want?" "Stay where you are. I'm coming to get you." Marcus hung up and turned to Sarah. "I have to go." "Marcus, let me help." "You can't help with this. I'm a doctor, Marcus. I've worked in refugee camps, treated victims of war crimes, seen what happens when good people do nothing." Sarah's voice was firm. "And I'm also the person who's been documenting the evidence of what these people are doing." Marcus weighed his options. Sarah's medical documentation could be crucial evidence, and he needed all the help he could get. But involving her meant putting her in danger. "If I let you help, you do exactly what I say when I say it. No questions, no medical ethics debates, no trying to save everyone, understood?" "Understood." 20 minutes later, Marcus and Sarah met Diego at a McDonald's on Verner Highway. Diego looked like he'd aged another 5 years overnight, his hands shaking as he drank coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "They called Mum's house at 6 this morning," Diego explained. "Said they had her, and if we didn't bring them what they wanted by tonight, they'd start sending pieces." Sarah winced, but Marcus's expression remained controlled. "Did they say where to meet them?" "The old auto plant on Michigan Avenue, same place where Miguel got shot." "They're using the same location because they control it," Marcus said. "Probably have it under surveillance, know all the approaches." "So what do we do?" Marcus pulled out the envelope Bull had given him. "We give them what they want." "You have what they're looking for?" Diego looked confused. "I have something better. I have enough evidence to destroy their entire operation." Marcus's voice was grim. "The question is whether we can use it to get Mom back without getting all of us killed." Sarah leaned forward. "What if we don't go in alone?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we bring backup? Not military, not police, but people who have a vested interest in stopping this weapons trafficking." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "Community leaders, pastors, people whose kids are getting shot with these weapons. If we can document what's happening and get it to the right people, we can expose this thing publicly." "These aren't people who worry about public exposure, Sarah. They kill anyone who threatens them. Then we make sure they can't kill all of us." Sarah's expression was determined. "Marcus, you said this goes back to Afghanistan, right? Military personnel involved in weapons trafficking?" "Yeah. Then this isn't just about Detroit street crime. This is about corruption in the military. Weapons being sold to criminals. American soldiers' equipment being used to kill American citizens. Sarah pulled out her phone. I know a reporter at the Detroit Free Press who specializes in military issues. If we can get this story to him, they'll kill us before any story gets published. Not if we do it right. Diego had been listening intently. Marcus, what if we don't just trade the documents for Mom? What if we record the whole thing? Get them on camera admitting what they're doing? Marcus considered this. It was risky, but it might be their only chance to expose the operation and protect his family at the same time. All right, he said finally, but we do this smart. Military precision, multiple backup plans, and everyone follows orders. One mistake, and we're all dead. Sarah nodded. What do you need from me? I need you to stay alive long enough to treat the wounded when this is over. Marcus's smile was grim. Because there are definitely going to be wounded. Outside the McDonald's, Detroit was waking up to another day. People heading to work, kids walking to school, families going about their normal lives, unaware that a war was being fought in their streets with weapons that had traveled halfway around the world to end up in the wrong hands. Marcus looked at Diego and Sarah, two people who'd been pulled into something much bigger and more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. In Afghanistan, he'd known who the enemy was. Here, the enemy wore familiar uniforms and hid behind legitimate institutions. But the mission was the same: protect the innocent, eliminate the threat, and get everyone home alive. The hard part would be doing all three. Elena Rodriguez sat in the basement of an abandoned factory in Hamtramck, her hands zip-tied behind her back, but her spirit unbroken. At 55, she'd survived poverty, single motherhood, and 3 tours of waiting for news about her eldest son. She wasn't about to be intimidated by men who hid their faces behind tactical masks. "Your boys are going to get themselves killed," said the man who seemed to be in charge. He was tall, athletic, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. When he'd removed his mask to drink coffee, Elena had seen a face that belonged in a corporate boardroom rather than a kidnapping operation. "My boys are survivors," Elena replied in accented English, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "They learned that from their mother." The man, who'd introduced himself only as Colonel, smiled without humor. "Mrs. Rodriguez, your eldest son stumbled into something he doesn't understand. We're offering him a way out. By threatening his family? By giving him an opportunity to walk away with everyone intact." The Colonel pulled up a chair across from Elena. "Marcus took something from Afghanistan, documents that don't belong to him. We just want them back. And then what? You let us go and we pretend this never happened?" The Colonel's silence was answer enough. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was putting together what he hoped wasn't a suicide mission. He'd chosen the abandoned Packard automotive plant as his staging area, close enough to the meeting location to respond quickly, far enough away to avoid detection, and familiar territory from his childhood exploration of Detroit's industrial ruins. "Radio check," Marcus said into his headset. "Sarah here, signal clear," came the response from the emergency room doctor, who'd volunteered to be their communications coordinator. "Diego, you copy?" "I'm here, Marcus." Diego's voice was tight with anxiety, but he was holding together. "Bull?" "Loud and clear, son. Equipment's ready." Sergeant Major Patterson had arrived an hour earlier with enough surveillance gear to outfit a small military unit. Marcus didn't ask where he'd acquired it, and Bull didn't volunteer the information. "Remember, we're not trying to win a firefight," Marcus addressed the group. "We're trying to get Mom back alive and document enough evidence to bring these people down. If shooting starts, our primary objective is survival and extraction." "What about justice?" Diego asked. "Justice comes after we're all alive to see it." Marcus spread out blueprints of the auto plant on an improvised table made from concrete blocks. Bull had somehow acquired architectural plans from the city planning office. 3 main entrances, multiple secondary exits, good sight lines from the upper floors. Marcus pointed to various locations. "They chose this place because they can control access, but that also means they're trapped if things go sideways." "How many people are we dealing with?" Sarah asked. "Unknown, but probably no more than 6 or 8. These operations stay small to minimize security risks." Marcus traced potential movement routes on the blueprint. "Bull, what's your assessment?" "Professional outfit? Probably ex-military contractors. They'll have the discipline not to panic, but they'll also follow predictable tactical patterns." Bull pointed to several locations. "Sniper overwatch here and here, blocking positions at the main entrances. and they'll keep the hostage somewhere with limited access. Sarah studied the plans. Marcus, what if we don't go in at all? What do you mean? I mean, what if we force them to come to us? Make them move your mother to a location we control? Marcus considered this. How? Tell them you'll only make the exchange at a public location, somewhere with witnesses, security cameras, limited escape routes. They'll never agree to that. They will if we give them no choice. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a news article she'd prepared. Detroit Free Press ready to publish. Military weapons trafficking ring exposed. Exclusive documents reveal corruption scandal. I gave them enough of the story to get them interested. Held back the evidence until we need it. You did what? Marcus stared at her. I created leverage. If something happens to us, the story publishes automatically. If we can get your mother back safely, we control when and how the story comes out. Bull whistled low. Doc, that's either brilliant or suicidal. Maybe both, Sarah admitted, but it changes the equation. Suddenly, they need us alive more than they need us dead. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. 1 hour. Auto plant main entrance. Come alone with the documents or start planning a funeral. Change of plans, Marcus said, showing the message to the others. Sarah, send your story to 3 more news outlets with instructions to publish if you don't check in every 6 hours. Already done. Bull, I need you to position Overwatch on the building across from the plant. You see anything that looks like it's going sideways, you call it in to Detroit PD. Marcus, I'm not leaving you to go in there alone. I'm not going alone. Marcus looked at Diego. Little brother, you ready to finish what you started? Diego's jaw tightened with determination. Let's get Mom back. 45 minutes later, Marcus and Diego approached the auto plant on foot, leaving their vehicle 6 blocks away. Marcus carried the envelope of documents in a messenger bag, but he'd also made photocopies and distributed them to Sarah and Bull as insurance. The plant loomed before them like a monument to industrial decay. Broken windows reflecting the afternoon sun, weeds growing through cracks in the concrete, graffiti covering walls that had once housed American manufacturing dreams. You sure about this? Diego asked. No, Marcus replied honestly. But sometimes you have to take the shot, even when you're not sure. They entered through the main entrance, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The plant had been stripped of most valuable materials years ago, leaving behind a skeleton of concrete and steel that created perfect acoustic conditions for an ambush. Rodriguez! The voice came from above, 2nd floor, northeast corner. Marcus automatically catalogued. You armed? Just my medical bag, Marcus called back, which was technically true. His Glock was in the bag, along with his trauma supplies. Smart man. Your mother's upstairs. Bring the documents. Marcus and Diego climbed a concrete staircase that had seen better decades. Each step took them further from their planned escape routes and deeper into enemy territory. They found Elena in what had once been a supervisor's office, zip-tied to a chair, but otherwise unharmed. Marcus felt relief flood through him. She was alive, alert and angry, which meant she was still fighting. Mijo, she said when she saw them, I told you not to come. Mothers don't get to make that call, Marcus replied. The colonel stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, flanked by 2 men in tactical gear. Marcus noted their positions, their weapons, their body language, all professional, all dangerous. The documents, the colonel said. Marcus held up the envelope. My mother first. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone who'd made life and death decisions under fire. You want what I have? You give me what I want. The colonel smiled. You're assuming you have something I can't just take. Try it, Marcus replied. But first ask yourself why I'd walk into an obvious trap unless I had an ace up my sleeve. The colonel's smile faded slightly. What ace? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed him Sarah's news article ready to publish. In 15 minutes, if I don't send a specific code, this story goes live on 4 different news websites simultaneously. By tomorrow morning, everyone from CNN to the Washington Post will be investigating military weapons trafficking. You're bluffing. Am I? Because if I am, the worst thing that happens is you kill us and continue your operation. But if I'm not, you've just destroyed a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise for the sake of pride. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Marcus could hear Diego's breathing, his mother's quiet prayers, the distant sound of Detroit traffic outside the plant, everything balanced on the edge of a knife. Finally, the colonel nodded to one of his men, who cut Eleanor's restraints. "The documents," he repeated. Marcus tossed him the envelope. "Everything you're looking for." The colonel opened it and began reading. His expression grew darker with each page. "This is very thorough," he said finally. "Very detailed, very dangerous. To you, maybe. To me, it's life insurance. No, Mr. Rodriguez, it's a death sentence." The colonel's voice was cold. "Because now I know exactly how much you know and exactly how much damage you can do." The tactical situation shifted in an instant. Marcus realized his mistake too late. He'd given them the evidence, but he'd also given them proof that he was too dangerous to leave alive. The colonel raised his sidearm. "Kill them all." The first shot shattered the office window. Before the colonel had finished giving his order, Marcus dove left, tackling Diego behind an overturned desk as glass and concrete fragments exploded around them. Eleanor rolled right, her years of factory work giving her the reflexes to move fast when it mattered. "Sniper!" one of the colonel's men shouted, but Marcus was already moving. Bull Patterson had positioned himself in the building across the street with a scoped rifle and 40 years of military experience. His first shot had taken out the colonel's weapon hand. His second shot punched through the wall 6 inches from the remaining gunman's head, sending both men diving for cover. "Move, move, move," Marcus shouted, pulling out his Glock and providing covering fire as Diego helped their mother toward the staircase. The colonel, clutching his wounded hand, screamed into a radio. "All units, converge on the plant. Kill them all." Marcus realized they'd walked into more than just an ambush. This was a coordinated operation with backup teams positioned around the building. Through the broken windows, he could see black SUVs pulling up outside, men with assault rifles taking positions around the plant's perimeter. "Bull, we've got company," Marcus spoke into his headset while keeping his gun trained on the office doorway. "I count 8 hostiles vehicles at all 3 main entrances." Bull's voice was calm, professional. "You need to get to the North Service Tunnel. I'll provide overwatch." Marcus remembered the tunnel from his childhood exploration of the plant, a maintenance passage that connected to the city's storm drain system. It had been their secret exit when they played war games as kids. Now it might be their only hope of survival as adults. "Diego, take Mom and head for the basement. Remember where we used to hide when we were playing soldiers?" Diego's eyes widened with understanding. "The tunnel under the loading dock. Go. I'll cover your retreat." Elena grabbed Marcus's arm. "Mijo, we stay together. Mom, I need you to trust me. I'll be right behind you, but someone needs to slow these guys down." As Diego and Elena disappeared down the staircase, Marcus could hear boots on concrete, multiple teams entering the building from different directions. These weren't street criminals. They moved with military precision and discipline. Bull's rifle cracked again from across the street, followed by a scream of pain and shouted orders. "Marcus, they're trying to flank around the east side. You've got maybe 2 minutes before they cut off your escape route." Marcus moved through the plant like a ghost, using every piece of cover, every shadow, every lesson Bull had taught him about urban warfare. His medical training had taught him anatomy. His military training had taught him where to place shots to disable rather than kill. He wasn't a killer by nature, but he was a protector by choice. He caught the first gunman at the top of the stairs, dropping him with a shot to the shoulder that sent the man's rifle clattering down the concrete steps. The second gunman came around a concrete pillar and found Marcus's Glock pressed against his temple. "Military contractor?" Marcus asked quietly. The man nodded, his eyes showing professional respect rather than fear. "Then you know the rules of engagement. Surrender now, and you walk away from this. Keep fighting, and people die unnecessarily." "Can't do that," the contractor replied. "Orders are orders." "I respect that," Marcus said, then hit him with a medical sleeper hold that dropped him unconscious in 10 seconds. "But I can't let you kill my family." Marcus reached the basement as Diego and Elena were pulling away a sheet of corrugated metal that covered the tunnel entrance. The space beyond was dark and narrow, barely wide enough for one person at a time. "Go," Marcus ordered. "I'll be right behind you." "Marcus," Sarah's voice came through his earpiece. "Detroit PD is responding to reports of gunfire, but they're still 5 minutes out. Copy that. Tell them to approach from the north. We'll be coming out through the storm drains on Porter Street." Eleanor squeezed through the tunnel opening, followed by Diego. As Marcus prepared to follow them, he heard the colonel's voice echoing through the plant's PA system. Apparently, some of the old factory systems still worked. "Rodriguez, You think you've won something, but you've only delayed the inevitable. We know where you work, where your friends live, where your brother goes to school. This doesn't end here. Marcus keyed his radio. Bull, you got a clean shot on our friend with the microphone? Negative, too much cover, and I'm running low on ammunition. Then it's time to change tactics. Marcus pulled a small device from his medical bag, a digital recorder he'd been carrying since the beginning of this mess. Sarah, remember that story you've got ready to publish? Yeah, what about it? Add an audio confession to it. Marcus turned up the volume on his recorder and spoke loudly enough to be heard throughout the plant. Colonel, this is Marcus Rodriguez, former Army medic, serial number 3647129. I'm recording this conversation for federal authorities. State your name and rank for the record. Go to hell, Rodriguez. Unknown subject refuses to identify himself, but is clearly coordinating military weapons trafficking operation in Detroit, Michigan, using personnel and equipment obtained through theft from U.S. Armed Forces inventory. Marcus spoke in the clipped professional tone of someone giving a deposition. Subject has admitted to kidnapping, attempted murder and conspiracy to distribute military weapons to civilian criminal organizations. The colonel's voice came back over the PA, furious but trapped. You don't know what you're dealing with, boy. This operation goes back years, involves people you can't touch. Please continue, Marcus said, still recording. Tell me about the people I can't touch. Pentagon contracts, State Department authorizations, CIA liaison. You think this is just some rogue operation? This is official policy, hidden behind bureaucratic language and classified authorizations. Marcus felt cold realization wash over him. This wasn't just corruption. This was systematic, sanctioned, and much bigger than anything he'd imagined. Sarah, you getting this? Every word. Marcus, this is huge. Yeah, and it means we're in more danger than I thought. Marcus squeezed into the tunnel entrance. If this goes as high as he's saying, they'll never stop coming after us. As he crawled through the narrow passage, following the sound of Diego and Elena ahead of him, Marcus realized that bringing down this operation would require more than evidence or media exposure. It would require allies in high places, protection from federal authorities, and a level of political sophistication that a former Army medic wasn't equipped to handle. But first, they had to survive the next 10 minutes. Behind him, Marcus could hear the colonel's men searching the basement, their tactical lights cutting through the darkness. They'd find the tunnel entrance soon enough. Diego, how far to the storm drain connection? Maybe 50 yards. Marcus, there's water down here. Recent rain must have backed up the system. Marcus could hear it now, the sound of rushing water somewhere ahead of them. Detroit's storm drain system was notorious for flooding during heavy rains, and the autumn weather had been particularly wet. They emerged from the maintenance tunnel into a larger concrete passage that reeked of industrial runoff and urban decay. The water was knee-deep and moving fast. Not dangerous yet, but getting deeper. Stay against the wall, Marcus instructed. If the current gets stronger, we could get swept away. Eleanor, who'd raised 2 boys in Detroit and knew every danger the city could offer, was already helping Diego navigate the slippery concrete. Mijo, there's light ahead. Looks like a street opening. Marcus could see it too, a dim glow that indicated they were approaching a storm drain outlet, but he could also hear something else, the sound of engines above and voices calling out coordinates. They'd made it out of the plant, but they weren't safe yet. The colonel's people were tracking them, probably using thermal imaging and radio intercepts to follow their progress through the drain system. Sarah, where's that police response? 3 minutes out. They're setting up a perimeter around the plant, but they don't know you're in the storm drains. Tell them to position units at the Porter Street outlet. We're going to need immediate protection when we surface. As they approached the drain outlet, Marcus could see daylight and the familiar sight of Detroit streets, but he could also see the silhouette of a man with a rifle positioned to cover their exit. They were trapped between the colonel's men behind them and an armed guard ahead of them in a tunnel that was slowly filling with water. Marcus keyed his radio one last time. Bull, I need a miracle. Working on it, son. Just keep your heads down for about 30 more seconds. Marcus didn't know what Bull had planned, but he'd learned to trust the old sergeant's judgment. In the distance, he could hear sirens approaching, Detroit PD responding to the call. The question was whether they'd arrive in time to matter. The explosion that rocked the auto plant sent vibrations through the storm drain system like an earthquake. Marcus grabbed Elena and Diego, pressing them against the concrete wall as debris rained down through the drainage grates above their heads. "Bull, what the hell was that?" Marcus spoke into his radio but got only static in response. Through the drain outlet ahead of them, Marcus could see the guard who'd been positioned to intercept them running toward the plant, shouting into his radio. Whatever Bull had done, it had worked as a distraction. "Move now!" Marcus pushed his family forward through the knee-deep water. They emerged from the storm drain onto Porter Street, blinking in the afternoon sunlight. In the distance, black smoke was rising from the auto plant, and Marcus could hear the colonel's voice screaming orders over radio chatter. A Detroit PD patrol car skidded around the corner, followed by 2 more units. The lead officer jumped out with his weapon drawn, but Marcus was already showing his hands and calling out his identity. "Marcus Rodriguez. I'm the one who called this in. I have evidence of a federal crime in progress." "Get down on the ground," the officer shouted, but Sarah's voice cut through the tension over a police scanner in one of the patrol cars. "Officer, this is Dr. Sarah Chen at Detroit General. Those are the victims I told you about. They need protection, not arrest." The lead officer, Sergeant Williams, according to his name tag, lowered his weapon slightly. "Doctor, Chen said you had information about military weapons trafficking?" Marcus pulled out his digital recorder. "Everything you need to know is on here. But first, we need to get my family somewhere safe. The people responsible for this have federal resources and won't hesitate to kill civilians." As if to emphasize his point, gunfire erupted from the direction of the auto plant. Williams grabbed his radio. "All units, we have active shooters at the Michigan Avenue industrial site. Request backup and tactical support." Bull's voice crackled through Marcus's earpiece. "Got separated from my rifle, but I'm mobile. The explosion was a distraction. Rigged some old machinery to blow when they tried to access the basement. Bought us some time. Where are you now?" "Moving toward your position on foot, but Marcus, we've got bigger problems. I monitored their radio chatter before the explosion. This isn't just a cleanup operation. They're implementing what they call Protocol 7. Marcus felt ice in his stomach. Military protocols were numbered by escalation level. "What's Protocol 7? Complete elimination of all potential witnesses and evidence. They're going to burn down half of Detroit if that's what it takes to cover their tracks." Sergeant Williams had been listening to the radio exchange. "Sir, who are you talking to?" "Retired Sergeant Major William Patterson, U.S. Army. He's the one who provided the intelligence on this operation. And he just blew up a building?" "He provided a tactical distraction to prevent the murder of civilians," Marcus corrected. "Right now, he's the only thing standing between us and a military contractor kill team with federal authorization." Williams looked skeptical until his radio crackled with a transmission from the tactical unit approaching the plant. "We have multiple casualties inside the structure. Appears to be mercenary-style execution of security personnel. Requesting federal assistance. This is beyond local jurisdiction." Sarah's voice came through on Marcus's earpiece. "Marcus, I've got problems here too. 2 men in suits just showed up at the hospital asking questions about Miguel Santos. They're not FBI, wrong credentials, wrong questions. Get out of there now. Already moving. I'm heading to the Free Press building. If we're going to break this story, it has to be now." Marcus turned to Sergeant Williams. "Officer, I need you to understand something. This isn't a local crime. This is a federal conspiracy involving the theft and distribution of military weapons, and the people responsible have resources that go way up the chain of command." "How high up?" Before Marcus could answer, Diego grabbed his arm. "Marcus, look." 3 black SUVs were approaching their position at high speed. Marcus could see rifle barrels protruding from the windows. "Everyone take cover," Williams shouted, drawing his sidearm. Marcus pushed Elena behind a patrol car as bullets began chipping concrete around their position. The Detroit PD officers returned fire, but they were outgunned and outmanned. "Bull, we're pinned down on Porter Street." "I see you. Hold position for 10 seconds. Marcus counted 8, 9, 10. Bull Patterson appeared on the rooftop across the street with what looked like a military sniper rifle. His first shot took out the front tire of the lead SUV, sending it into a spinning crash. His second shot spider-webbed the windshield of the second vehicle. "Where the hell did he get that rifle?" Williams shouted over the gunfire. "So you don't want to know," Marcus replied. The third SUV backed away quickly, but not before Marcus got a clear look at the colonel through the passenger window. The man's hand was bandaged from Bull's earlier shot, but his expression was pure rage. Bull dropped down from the rooftop with the fluid movement of someone half his age. We need to move. I just bought us maybe 5 minutes before they regroup with heavier firepower. Where can we go that's safe? Nowhere safe until we expose this thing publicly. Bull looked at the police officers, who were calling for backup and requesting federal assistance. But I know someone who might be able to help. Elena, who had been remarkably calm throughout the firefight, finally spoke up. Mijo, who are these people? What did you find in Afghanistan that's worth all this killing? Marcus looked at his mother, realizing he'd never fully explained the scope of what they were dealing with. Mom, I found evidence that someone in the military has been stealing weapons and selling them to criminals, not just here in Detroit, but probably in cities across the country. How many weapons? Williams asked. Bull answered. Based on the documentation Marcus recovered, we're talking about millions of dollars worth of military hardware over several years, enough to outfit private armies, or terrorist organizations, Marcus added grimly. The weapons Diego saw being distributed to gang members. That's probably just the lowest level of the operation. The really dangerous stuff is probably going to buyers with much bigger plans. Williams's radio crackled. All units, be advised we have federal agents en route to your location. ETA 5 minutes. Federal agents from which agency? Marcus asked. Williams shrugged. Doesn't say. Bull and Marcus exchanged looks. If the colonel had been telling the truth about Pentagon and CIA involvement, then federal agents might not be coming to help them. We need to leave now, Bull said. I can't leave, Williams replied. I've got orders to secure this scene. Sergeant, with respect, your orders might get you killed. The people we're dealing with don't distinguish between criminals and cops. They just eliminate anyone who threatens their operation. As if to prove Bull's point, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from the colonel's number. Protocol 7 is in effect. You have 30 minutes to surrender yourself and all evidence, or we start targeting hospitals, schools, and police stations. Your choice, Rodriguez. Marcus showed the message to Williams, whose face went pale. They're threatening to attack civilian targets. It's not a threat, Bull said grimly. It's a tactic. Force your enemy to surrender by making the cost of resistance too high to bear. Eleanor took the phone from Marcus and read the message. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. What's funny, Mom? These men think they're fighting soldiers, Eleanor said, but they're not fighting soldiers. They're fighting a family. And families don't surrender, they fight back. She pulled out her own phone and began dialing. Mrs. Santos, it's Elena Rodriguez. Yes, I know about Miguel. Listen to me carefully. I need you to call every mother in the neighborhood and tell them to get their children inside. Right now. As Eleanor began organizing a community response, Marcus realized his mother understood something he'd missed. This wasn't just about evidence or federal crimes or military corruption. This was about protecting their neighborhood, their families, their way of life. The colonel had made a tactical error. He'd threatened not just Marcus, but an entire community of people who'd already lost too much to violence and poverty to be intimidated by more of the same. Bull, Marcus said, remember what you taught me about asymmetric warfare? Yeah? Time to turn the tables. They want to fight dirty? Let's give them a war they can't win. In the distance, the sound of approaching helicopters mixed with police sirens and the everyday noises of a city that had no idea it was about to become a battlefield. And the community center on Verna Highway had been transformed into a makeshift command post within 30 minutes of Elena Rodriguez making her phone calls. Mothers arrived with their children. Fathers brought tools and supplies, and teenagers who'd normally be rivals found themselves united against a common threat. Marcus stood in the center of it all, feeling overwhelmed by the response his mother had generated. Maria Santos sat at a folding table with a laptop, coordinating with other neighborhoods. Father Miguel Herrera from St. Anne's Catholic Church was on the phone with city council members. Even Tommy Reyes, Diego's friend who'd originally gotten him involved with the weapons runners, had shown up with information about drop sites and gang connections. This is insane, Sergeant Williams muttered, watching the controlled chaos. Half these people should be evacuated, not gathering in one location. They tried evacuation in Hurricane Katrina, Elena replied calmly, organizing medical supplies that Sarah had brought from the hospital. Government said they'd take care of everyone, and people died waiting for help that never came. These people know better than to trust promises from strangers. Bull was setting up communications equipment in what had been the children's playroom. Mrs. Rodriguez is right, Sergeant. Sometimes the safest place is surrounded by people who'll fight for you. Marcus's phone buzzed. Sarah texting from the Detroit Free Press building. Story goes live in 20 minutes, unless they shut down our servers first. Federal agents just arrived here asking questions. Not FBI, something called Office of Special Investigations. Bull, what's the Office of Special Investigations? Military police, but for federal contractors and black operations. If they're involved, this goes higher than Pentagon procurement fraud. Bull's expression was grim. Marcus, we might have stumbled into something that was sanctioned at the highest levels of government. You mean this weapons trafficking was authorized? I mean, it's possible that what we think is corruption might actually be official policy. Hidden, deniable, but official. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If Bull was right, then exposing the operation wouldn't just bring down a criminal conspiracy. It would expose classified government activities that powerful people had spent years keeping secret. Diego approached with Tommy Reyes in tow. Both young men looked scared but determined. Marcus, Tommy knows where they're keeping the weapons, Diego said. Tommy nodded nervously. There's a warehouse in River Rouge, right on the Detroit River. Military trucks come in at night, unload containers, then civilian trucks take the stuff out the next day. How many guards? Usually just 2 or 3, but they've got serious hardware, not street guns, military stuff. Marcus studied a map of the area that Father Herrera had provided. River Rouge was industrial, isolated, with good water access for shipping, perfect for moving large quantities of weapons without attracting attention. If we could get photographic evidence of the operation— Forget photographs, Bull interrupted. We need those weapons. Physical evidence that proves the connection between military theft and street distribution. You want us to raid a weapons depot? I want us to recover stolen U.S. military property and return it to proper custody, Bull corrected. There's a legal distinction. Sergeant Williams looked skeptical. And who exactly represents proper custody in this situation? Because if this goes as high as you think it does, we can't trust federal authorities. Marcus's earpiece crackled with Sarah's voice. Marcus, we've got a problem. The OSI agents just confiscated our computers and shut down the news story. They're claiming national security. Can you get the story out through other channels? Working on it. But Marcus, they know about the community center. I heard them coordinating with someone about neutralizing the civilian gathering point. Eleanor, who'd been listening to the conversation, stood up with the kind of authority that only comes from years of being the person everyone turns to in a crisis. Mijos, it's time to stop running and start fighting back. Mom, these aren't street criminals. They have military equipment, federal authorization. They have fear, Elena interrupted. They're afraid of what we know, afraid of what we might tell people, afraid that their secrets will come out. Fear makes people stupid. She pointed to the map of River Rouge. How many weapons are in this warehouse? Tommy swallowed nervously. Hundreds, maybe thousands, enough to outfit an army. And if those weapons stay there, how many more children like Miguel get shot? The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Mrs. Rodriguez, Bull said carefully, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we take those weapons away from the people who are using them to hurt our children, and we give them to the people who are supposed to protect us. The police? The community. Elena's voice was steady, determined. These weapons came from our tax dollars, from our sons who served in the military, from our neighborhoods where people are dying. We take them back, and we use them to protect ourselves. Marcus stared at his mother, realizing she was proposing something that went far beyond exposing a criminal conspiracy. She was talking about armed community self-defense against what might be a government-sanctioned operation. Mom, that would be— Revolution? Elena smiled. Mijo, sometimes revolution is what happens when people get tired of being victims. Father Herrera cleared his throat. Elena, I understand your anger, but violence— Father, with respect, they're already using violence against us. The question is whether we defend ourselves or let them kill us one by one. Marcus looked around the room at faces he'd known since childhood. Mothers who'd raised children in poverty, fathers who'd worked factory jobs until the factories closed, young people who'd grown up dodging bullets and police harassment with equal skill. These weren't professional soldiers or criminals. They were ordinary people who'd been pushed too far, but they were also people who'd survived everything Detroit could throw at them. They knew how to organize, how to support each other, how to fight when fighting was the only option left. All right, Marcus said finally, but if we're going to do this, we do it right. military precision, minimal casualties, clear objectives. Bull nodded approvingly. First rule of unconventional warfare. Know your enemy. Know your terrain. Know your people. Tell me, how many people do you think work at that warehouse during the day shift? Maybe 10 or 12, but Marcus, some of them are just regular workers. Dock guys, forklift operators. They don't know what they're handling. Then we make sure they don't get hurt. Marcus began sketching a plan on the map. We go in during shift change when there are fewer people on site, secure the weapons, document everything, and turn it over to... Who? Local media. Sarah's voice came through the earpiece. I've got contacts at Channel 7 and the Michigan Chronicle who aren't connected to federal law enforcement. And if the OSI agents try to stop us? Elena Rodriguez smiled with the same expression she'd worn when telling her sons they could either clean their rooms or face consequences they wouldn't like. Then they'll learn what happens when you threaten a Detroit neighborhood that's tired of being pushed around. Outside the community center, Marcus could hear helicopters circling, but he could also hear something else. Car doors slamming, voices calling out in Spanish and English, the sound of more people arriving to help. The colonel had made a fundamental miscalculation. He'd thought he was dealing with isolated individuals who could be intimidated or eliminated quietly. Instead, he'd awakened something much more dangerous, a community that had decided to fight back. Marcus checked his weapons and looked at his brother, his mother, and the dozens of people who'd volunteered to risk everything to protect their neighborhood. Diego, you ready for this? Ready to finish it, Diego replied. Marcus keyed his radio to address everyone in the room. All right, people. Time to take our streets back. The River Rouge warehouse sat on the Detroit River like a concrete fortress, surrounded by chain-link fencing and illuminated by sodium lights that cast everything in harsh orange shadows. Marcus crouched behind a shipping container with Bull, watching the facility through night vision binoculars as the evening shift change began. 6 guards visible, rotating patrols every 15 minutes, Bull reported quietly. 2 at the main gate, 2 on the dock, 2 mobile units. Civilian workers? Looks like most of the day shift cleared out an hour ago. I count maybe 4 people still inside, probably supervisors or night security. Marcus keyed his radio to address the teams positioned around the perimeter. Eleanor had organized 30 volunteers from the community center, dividing them into groups based on military experience, mechanical skills, and familiarity with the neighborhood. Team Alpha, report. Alpha in position, came Diego's voice from the north side of the facility. He was leading a group of younger volunteers who would handle communications and evacuation if things went wrong. Team Bravo? Bravo ready, reported Maria Santos, who'd insisted on participating despite her son still being in the hospital. Her team was responsible for securing the civilian workers and getting them to safety. Team Charlie? Charlie standing by, said Father Herrera, whose team would document everything they found for media release. The priest had surprised everyone by revealing that he'd served as an army chaplain in Iraq before joining the clergy. Marcus checked his watch. 21:47 hours. The plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. Neutralize the guards, secure the weapons, document the evidence, and get out before federal agents could respond. They'd estimated a 15-minute window before overwhelming force arrived. All teams remember, we're not here to hurt anyone who doesn't threaten civilians. Our mission is recovery of stolen military property and protection of our community. Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece from her position at the media staging area. Marcus, I've got Channel 7 news crew standing by, and the Michigan Chronicle is ready to live stream whatever you find. But OSI agents are mobilizing from multiple locations. You've got maybe 20 minutes before this place is surrounded. Copy that. Marcus turned to Bull. You sure about this? Son, I've been fighting one war or another for 30 years. This is the first time I'm fighting for something that actually matters to me personally. Bull chambered around in his rifle. Let's go get our weapons back. Marcus gave the signal, and 4 teams moved simultaneously toward the warehouse complex. The plan depended on speed, coordination, and the element of surprise. Everything Marcus had learned about small unit tactics in Afghanistan applied to an industrial facility in Detroit. Team Alpha cut through the fence on the north side, while Team Bravo approached the loading docks. Marcus and Bull went directly for the main entrance, using bolt cutters on the gate locks and moving with the silent precision of soldiers who'd done this before. The first guard never saw them coming. Bull approached from the blind spot behind a security booth and used a sleeper hold to drop the man unconscious without a sound. Marcus zip-tied the guard's hands and checked his equipment: military-grade radio, tactical vest, and a sidearm that definitely hadn't been purchased through civilian channels. "Guard 1 neutralized," Marcus whispered into his radio. "Guard 2 down," came Diego's voice. His team had successfully taken the roving patrol on the north side. "Loading dock secure," reported Maria Santos. 3 civilian workers secured and evacuated. They were just longshoremen, didn't know what they were handling. Marcus and Bull reached the main warehouse entrance to find Father Herrera's team already inside, setting up cameras and documentation equipment. What they saw made Marcus's blood run cold. The warehouse contained enough military hardware to outfit a battalion. Assault rifles, machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, body armor, communications equipment, medical supplies, and cases upon cases of ammunition, all bearing U.S. military markings and inventory numbers. "Jesus Christ," Bull whispered. "This isn't weapons trafficking. This is preparation for war." Father Herrera was filming everything with a high-definition camera while calling out inventory numbers to his team members. 47 M4 rifles, 23 M249 squad automatic weapons, 8 M240 machine guns, 16 AT-4 rocket launchers. "Marcus," Sarah's voice was urgent through the earpiece, "you need to see what Tommy found in the office." Marcus made his way to a small administrative office where Tommy Reyes was standing in front of a wall covered with maps, photographs, and documents. The maps showed major cities across the United States, each marked with colored pins. The photographs showed community centers, schools, and religious buildings. "They're not just selling weapons to criminals," Tommy said, his voice shaking. "They're planning to use them." Marcus studied the documents more closely. Shipping manifests showed weapons deliveries to addresses in Chicago, Houston, Phoenix, and Miami. Communication logs detailed coordination with local assets in each city. And at the center of it all was an operational plan titled Project Homeland Reset. Bull read over Marcus's shoulder. "Coordinated domestic incidents designed to justify expanded federal police powers and martial law implementation." Bull's voice was hollow. "They're planning false flag operations." "False flag?" "Stage terrorist attacks, using the weapons they've been distributing, then blame them on domestic extremists or foreign terrorists. Give the government an excuse to implement authoritarian control measures." Bull pointed to a timeline on the wall. And according to this, Detroit was supposed to be the test case. Marcus felt sick as the full scope of the operation became clear. The weapons trafficking wasn't just about money, it was about creating the pretext for a fundamental change in American society. "All teams, this is bigger than we thought," Marcus announced over the radio. "We need to—" Floodlights suddenly illuminated the entire warehouse complex, followed by the sound of helicopters approaching fast. "All teams, federal agents inbound," Sarah shouted through the radio. "Multiple agencies, military transport, armed response teams." Through the warehouse windows, Marcus could see black SUVs surrounding the facility and tactical teams taking positions. But he could also see something else: news vans from local television stations and crowds of people from the community gathering at the perimeter. Elena's voice came over the radio with calm authority. "Mijos, they can't kill all of us with cameras rolling and the whole neighborhood watching. Document everything you can, then prepare to surrender peacefully." "Mum, they're not going to take prisoners." "Yes, they will. Because if they shoot unarmed civilians on live television, they lose everything they've been trying to protect." Marcus realized his mother was right. The conspiracy depended on secrecy and deniability. Mass murder of community activists in front of news cameras would destroy any chance of maintaining the cover-up, but it would also require trusting that whoever was in charge of the response team would make that same calculation. Through the warehouse's main entrance, Marcus could see federal agents approaching with weapons drawn. Leading them was the colonel, his wounded hand in a sling, but his expression confident. "Rodriguez," the colonel shouted through a bullhorn, "you're surrounded by federal agents executing a lawful operation under National Security Authority. Surrender immediately." Father Herrera continued filming everything, while Bull quietly transmitted data from the documents to Sarah's media contacts. Marcus checked his weapon one last time, then made a decision that would determine whether his community survived the night. He walked to the warehouse entrance, hands visible but not raised, and spoke loudly enough for the news cameras to hear. "I am Marcus Rodriguez, United States Army veteran, serial number 36471289. I am here recovering stolen military property that has been illegally distributed to criminal organizations. I demand that these weapons be returned to proper military custody and that the theft ring responsible be prosecuted under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The colonel's response was to raise his sidearm. You're under arrest for terrorism, weapons theft, and conspiracy against the United States government. Colonel, Marcus replied, I think you've got that backwards. Behind the federal agents, Marcus could see the crowd from his neighborhood growing larger. Elena Rodriguez stood at the front, surrounded by mothers whose children had been shot with the weapons stored in this warehouse. They weren't armed, but they weren't backing down either. The standoff that would determine the future of American democracy was about to begin in a warehouse in Detroit, between a community that refused to be victims and a government that had forgotten who it was supposed to serve. The standoff lasted 6 hours and changed everything. Marcus stood in the warehouse entrance as dawn broke over the Detroit River, surrounded by stolen weapons and federal agents, while news helicopters circled overhead and the story spread across social media faster than any government agency could contain it. The hashtag Detroit Warehouse was trending nationally within the first hour. Rodriguez, this is your final warning. The colonel's voice was hoarse from shouting orders that his own people were increasingly reluctant to follow. Surrender now or face the consequences. Colonel, Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly to the news cameras positioned beyond the police perimeter. I'm a United States Army veteran who discovered evidence of weapons trafficking and took action to protect my community. The only thing I'm surrendering is these stolen weapons to their rightful owners, the American people. Behind the federal agents, the crowd had grown to over 200 people. Elena Rodriguez had called in favors from union organizers, church groups, and community activists from across Detroit. They stood in peaceful formation, many holding photographs of family members who'd been killed by gun violence. Inside the warehouse, Father Herrera's team had catalogued and photographed everything. The evidence was overwhelming. Thousands of weapons, detailed shipping records, and operational plans that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Most damning of all were communications logs showing coordination with federal agencies that were supposed to be investigating weapons trafficking, not facilitating it. Bull Patterson had positioned himself at a second-floor window with a clear view of the standoff below. Marcus, I've got eyes on federal reinforcements approaching from 3 directions, but I also see Detroit PD units that don't look too happy about being ordered to stand down. Sergeant Williams had been placed under federal authority when the OSI agents arrived, but Marcus could see the conflict in the man's face. Williams had joined the police force to protect his community, not to enable government cover-ups. Sarah's voice crackled through Marcus's earpiece. The story is spreading faster than they can suppress it. CNN picked it up. Washington Post has reporters en route, and congressional offices are already demanding investigations. What about the OSI agents who shut down the first story? Turns out they exceeded their authority. Real FBI agents showed up an hour ago and arrested 3 of them for impersonating federal officers. Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. The conspiracy was unraveling, but the question remained whether he and his family would survive to see justice done. Diego's voice came over the radio from his position at the warehouse loading dock. Marcus, some of the federal agents are backing away from their positions. Looks like they're getting new orders. Through the warehouse windows, Marcus could see confusion spreading through the tactical teams. Agents were talking on radios, looking uncertain, and in some cases actively disengaging from confrontational positions. The colonel seemed to sense his authority slipping away. All units maintain positions. We have authorization from the highest levels. Colonel, what's your real name? Marcus called out. Because I'm streaming this live to federal investigators who want to know who authorized an armed assault on American citizens. For the first time, the colonel hesitated. Marcus pressed his advantage. You're not OSI, are you? You're a private contractor hired to clean up a botched operation. No federal authority, no legal standing, just a bunch of mercenaries trying to cover up their own crimes. Bull's voice came through the earpiece. Marcus, look northeast. Detroit PD units are moving into position between the federal agents and the crowd. Williams just told his superior he's not going to stand by and watch civilians get shot. Marcus could see it happening. The authority structure that the colonel had depended on was collapsing as local law enforcement, real federal agents, and public scrutiny exposed the operation for what it really was. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward from the crowd, walking slowly toward the police line until she was close enough to be heard without shouting. "My son Marcus served 3 tours in Afghanistan," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "He came home because he believed in protecting American families from violence. These weapons in this warehouse have been used to kill American children in American cities. My son didn't risk his life overseas so criminals could steal military weapons and use them against his own community." The colonel raised his weapon toward Elena, but before he could fire, Sergeant Williams stepped between them. "Sir, I won't allow you to threaten civilians under my jurisdiction." Other Detroit PD officers moved to support Williams, creating a protective barrier between the community and the federal tactical teams. The colonel found himself facing not just Marcus and the community activists, but local law enforcement officers who'd decided their oath to protect and serve meant something. Marcus seized the moment. "Colonel, it's over. The evidence is public, the story is out, and the people you're working for are going to throw you under the bus to save themselves. Your only choice now is whether you want to be arrested as a traitor or as a mercenary." The colonel's radio crackled with a transmission that everyone could hear. "All units, disengage immediately. Operation is terminated. Return to base for debriefing." "Sir, we have the situation contained." "Colonel Morrison, you are relieved of command. Federal marshals are en route to take you into custody. Any further action on your part will be considered obstruction of justice." The use of the colonel's real name sent a visible shock through him. He looked around at his tactical teams, who were already withdrawing to their vehicles, and at the crowd of civilians who'd stood their ground against federal intimidation. Bull appeared at Marcus's shoulder, having come down from his overwatch position. "It's finished, son. The cavalry arrived just in time." "What cavalry?" "Real federal investigators who've been building a case against this operation for months. Turns out your evidence was the missing piece they needed to make arrests." As federal marshals moved in to arrest Colonel Morrison and his remaining associates, Marcus walked out of the warehouse and toward his mother. Elena Rodriguez embraced her son while cameras rolled, and the Detroit community celebrated a victory that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. "Is it really over?" Diego asked, joining his family. Marcus looked around at the warehouse full of recovered weapons, the federal agents being led away in handcuffs, and the crowd of neighbors who'd risked everything to support each other. "The shooting's over," Marcus said, "but the real work is just beginning." 6 months later, Marcus Rodriguez stood in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C., raising his right hand to be sworn in as a witness before the House Committee on Armed Services. The hearing was titled "Investigation into Military Equipment Theft and Domestic Weapons Trafficking," and Marcus's testimony would be the centerpiece of reforms designed to prevent future corruption. In the gallery behind him sat Elena, Diego, Sarah, and Bull, along with Miguel Santos, who'd recovered fully from his injuries and was now working with community organizations to prevent gang recruitment. "Mr. Rodriguez," the committee chairman began, "in your opinion, how extensive was this weapons trafficking operation?" "Congressman, based on the evidence we recovered, the operation extended to at least 12 major cities and involved the theft and distribution of over $50 million worth of military equipment over a 5-year period. And the purpose of this operation?" Marcus looked directly into the television cameras that were broadcasting the hearing live. "The purpose was to create a pretext for the implementation of martial law in American cities by staging false flag terrorist attacks using stolen military weapons, then blaming those attacks on domestic extremists or foreign agents." The hearing room erupted in shocked murmurs. Even 6 months later, the full scope of the conspiracy was difficult for most Americans to accept. "How were you able to expose this operation?" "Congressman, I wasn't able to expose it alone. It took an entire community of people who decided they wouldn't allow their neighborhoods to be used as testing grounds for government oppression. It took mothers who'd lost children to gun violence, police officers who remembered their oath to protect civilians, journalists who chose truth over access, and ordinary citizens who proved that democracy works when people participate in it." After his testimony, Marcus stepped outside the Capitol building to find Eleanor waiting for him with a newspaper. "Detroit Free Press, front page," she said, showing him the headline, "Rodriguez Bill Passes Senate, New Oversight for Military Equipment." "They named a bill after me?" "They named a bill after all of us, mijo, after everyone who stood up when it mattered." Marcus looked out over the National Mall, where tourists and school groups were visiting monuments to American democracy. The system had worked, but only because people had forced it to work. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Back in Detroit, treating another GSW victim. 16-year-old kid shot with a .22 caliber pistol. Regular street crime, not military weapons. It's progress. Marcus smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. In Detroit, community organizations were working with reformed police departments to address gun violence through intervention rather than militarization. Across the country, congressional oversight had led to the recovery of millions of dollars worth of stolen military equipment. But most importantly, a community had learned that it had power to protect itself, power to demand accountability, and power to ensure that government served the people rather than the other way around. Diego appeared at Marcus's shoulder, carrying a portfolio from George Washington University, where he was now studying criminal justice. "Ready to go home?" Diego asked. Marcus took one last look at the Capitol dome, then nodded. Ready. The 3 generations of the Rodriguez family walked toward Union Station together, heading back to Detroit, back to a community that had learned it didn't have to be a victim, back to a neighborhood that had proven ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they stood together. Behind them, the wheels of justice continued to turn, slowly but inevitably, driven by the truth that Marcus and his community had refused to let die. The war was over. The peace was just beginning.